Bibliophiles of the internet, my name's Adriana, and today I'm here to finally bring you my August wrap-up. This was like the first time ever I actually had enough arcs to do a passable arc August, so I did, and I also read some other exciting releases. Also, I did want to say up front, if you enjoy any of these reviews, feel free to check out my new Patreon where you can support the channel and the content I make if you would like. So first up, I read my arc of Frankly in Love by David Yoon. This recently came out from Penguin Teen on September 10th. It's an Own Voices contemporary YA story about a Korean-American teen, Frank Lee, who kind of feels caught between two worlds. He doesn't really feel American enough, and he doesn't feel Korean enough. Frank's immigrant parents have always wanted him to quote-unquote date Korean, but of course Frank has gone and fallen for a girl who is white. So in order to date this girl, he initiates this agreement with one of his Korean family friends, Joy, so that they can go off together on dates when really they're going to spend time with the person they want. But more than that, this story is really about Frank's relationship with himself and how he can better learn how to understand his parents and why they make the rules they make. This story does contain triggers for cheating, racist comments, the invocation of racial slurs, a minor instance of gun violence, and peripheral exploration of terminal illness. This is one of the biggest fall releases, and I still feel kind of back and forth about it because I think it's been mismarketed as a cute, diverse rom-com when it's so much heavier than that, and I would definitely say it's more coming of age than anything else. I definitely felt both extremes when reading this book. There were times when I wished it would challenge the norm a little bit more, and times when I felt it was very provoking and really made me feel and think. I think what this book is really trying to say is that we all want to know the people in our lives and to be known by them in return, and the fact of the matter is that process is simpler for some folks more than others. Straight up, POC folks are expected to distinguish themselves, to identify themselves as being apart from the norm, and that naturally creates even more distance in every aspect of our lives. From that, there's a very fine line between being apart and actively excluding others the way you've been excluded yourself as a kind of recompense. That goes for both Frank's parents, who only trust other Korean people, and for Frank as well, who doesn't even try to understand his parents or really think about why he wants what he wants. I think Frank has a lot of internalized racism, understandably, and a lot of that is turned inwards at himself, making him want to forsake his culture, his background, and his experiences for a majority of this book. This story asks, how can we learn to be generous where the world has taught us to be afraid? And do any of us even know what the heck we're doing? Spoiler, we don't. Everyone in Frank's family is faking it, point blank. Frank puts on this fake relationship with Joy to get his parents off his back and have some space to breathe, but Frank's parents are also putting up a front and trying to make it seem like they are handling their lives as immigrants well, that they have everything under control, that they are successful, because they don't want anyone to see them as less. So I feel like this whole story is about Frank breaking down those walls, learning how to be real, and realizing what really matters in his life. That said, as I mentioned before, there is cheating in this book, which for me is not great. I have a lot of empathy for characters who are fallible, characters who make mistakes, but I just think when it comes to cheating, it's so premeditated and there will never be a good enough reason or excuse. I also feel like this story could have gone further in challenging the dominance of whiteness and white privilege and how that dominance leads to hatred that's turned both inwards and outwards, and how that in turn leads to casual racism, because it does. And I feel like this book falls into that trap of overcompensating for voice by leaning really heavily into strange humor or quirkiness that doesn't always read well or completely work. But that is not to devalue this book. I think a lot of people are going to find meaningful representation within these pages, rightfully so, and I think the payoff at the end is much more powerful than you would expect. But because I'm still so torn over it, I think I have to give this one 3.5 stars. After that, I listened to With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, read by the author herself. I am not going to talk about this book here because in honor of Latinx Heritage Month, I did a 5 reasons to read video for this book talking about everything I got from it, so that will be down below if you would like to watch that. Similarly, I also made a 5 reasons to read video for another of my favorite 2019 reads, Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia, read by Yeta Cotesman, and I would definitely encourage you to also check that out. So after that, I picked up my arc of Kingdom of Souls by Raina Barron. This was also recently released. It's an Own Voices West African-inspired YA fantasy about Ara, who comes from a powerful line of witch doctors, but she herself has never been able to summon magic. When she hears whispers of a demon king rising and the children of her kingdom begin to go missing, Ara is more determined than ever to finally unlock her magic, and she finds this backdoor method that will guarantee her magic, but only if she gives up years of her life as the price. This book is nearly 500 pages, but I found it to be a really compelling and memorable story with consistently high stakes. I think the most powerful part of this story is the relationships Ada has with her family and how that really drives everything she does. Ada's mom, for example, is a powerful priestess, and there's incredible pressure coming from her, and she's constantly reminding Ada that she is not good enough and that she'll only ever be a disappointment. And I think Ada feels very isolated because of that, especially because magic is a big part of life in her kingdom and her family, and she's always been denied access to that magic. Ada also has a sister who is the complete opposite. She's overflowing with magic and power, and in a way that's also disappointing to their mother because she could never hope to control that kind of force. So there is a really interesting back and forth between Ada and her family members as she's learning that you have to recognize your power wherever it lives. There's actually a great quote where Ada says, "With or without my magic, my power lies in my mind, my decisions, even in my mistakes." Ada is rash and stubborn and impatient, but those things can also lend her strength when the time is right. This first book is definitely epic in scope, and I think it was full of some really memorable and unique moments, especially in a genre that tends to be so oversaturated and homogenous. I'm really excited about where this series is going, and I gave this first installment 4 stars. Then we have one of my favorite books I read in August, which was Well Met by Jen DeLuca. This is an adult romance about Emily, whose boyfriend just left her and forced her out of her apartment just when her sister was injured in a car accident. So she bounces from one situation to another as she relocates to her sister's small town to help her sister recover and also take care of her niece. The thing is, her niece very much wants to volunteer in the local Renaissance fair, but she's not allowed to volunteer without an adult. So Emily finds herself suddenly cast as a tavern wench, and she finds that when she's in character, she has really great flirtatious energy with another volunteer, Simon, who plays a dashing pirate. But when they're out of character, they seem to be unable to break down their walls and connect in quite the same way. I was immediately drawn to Emily as a character because she's going through so much shit, but she has such a positive outlook on life. When the story begins, she has lost so much, but she doesn't think of it as a void, but rather that she has more space in her life and more of herself to give to other folks. When her family is hurting and needs help, when this local community needs volunteers, when a neighbor needs a helping hand, Emily thinks to herself, I have shoulder enough to help bear these burdens and make a positive difference. And I love that this is not solely a romance. Emily's main objective is not to find romantic love, it's to find herself and to rediscover the very essence of her own heart. She's been cruelly left behind by her ex, she dropped out of school, she was forced out of her home with no time to find a new place, and she's learning how to be a caretaker and a role model and a Ren Fair volunteer all at once. Emily doesn't know what her future could even look like, but by joining the Ren Fair, she's realizing that she can do so much more than she thought and that she can give so much more than she thought. It's really about her rediscovering her capacity for passion, her ability to be excited by and invested in things, and finding a place where she belongs and really shines. And going into this, you might expect a seasoned pro who knows their persona and has done this for many, many years, but Emily is literally just hearing about the existence of Ren Fair, so you get to witness the joy of her discovery and her delight in finding all these new ways to connect with other folks. I also really like the dynamic between Simon and Emily because Simon is still in the process of grieving his brother, and Emily is dealing with all these new things, including heartbreak. So I think it's easier for them to flirt in character because they can drop their emotional baggage and pretend like their personal history and the inhibitions created by it just don't exist. And then it's doubly compelling to see how these two characters reconcile their real life feelings and experiences and how they have to sort of catch up to the relationship their characters have already established. This was super sweet, full of amazing grand gestures and an ending that caused me to kick all the sheets off my bed because I loved it so much, and that's why I gave it 4.5 stars. And finally, I read my arc of The Beautiful by Renee Attier. This book is set to release on October 8th. It's YA historical fiction with a paranormal twist about Celine, who has recently fled her life as a dressmaker in Paris in what she deems to be a state of disgrace. Determined to keep her past hidden, she takes refuge in a convent in New Orleans, but even as she's trying to start this new life, Celine can't deny her true nature and finds herself drawn into the glitz and glamour and drama of this powerful society known as La Cour de Lion. But it also seems like murder is haunting her every step as people around her start to mysteriously die, and it seems like the Court of Lions is at the heart of the investigation, causing Celine to wonder what's really going on within the court. This book does contain triggers for descriptions of gore and violence and brief depictions of attempted rape and sexual assault. First of all, I have to say that I really love how Renee Attier does vampires in this story because it's so different. The word vampire doesn't even come up until almost the end of the book, so it really keeps you guessing about which creatures are involved and to what extent, and the denial of invoking that language really keeps you on your toes. And this is a really lush, descriptive, atmospheric, sensual story, perfectly befitting of the romantic era in which it's set. I think the biggest question at the heart of the story is, what is the true nature of power and what does that look like? In my opinion, the story posits that power is being in control of how others perceive you and the ability to entice whatever reaction you want out of other people at any given moment. As an Asian woman and a survivor of sexual assault, that is intoxicating for Celine, who's drawn to this court not because of any cosmetic or physical or surface level attraction, but because she longs for the power to control her own narrative. Celine wants to be impossible to be ignored or dismissed by anyone under any circumstance, and that is the kind of power this court boasts and promises. Of course, she's also drawn to the court because of this darkly charming Spanish man named Sebastian, who is unapologetically himself and allows Celine to be the same, because when they're together, they're able to entertain their quote-unquote base desires that would otherwise be a source of shame or disgust. And there's a really striking moment when Sebastian tells Celine, "My actions are not your responsibility." And again, being an Asian woman and a survivor of sexual assault, that's a powerful thing for Celine to hear in that moment. To take pride in what people consider to be less, to refuse to fold under any circumstances, to not apologize for the space you take up, that's a very big deal for both of these characters. And I think embracing the supernatural and the unknown is a way for Celine to reject propriety and society at large. There's all these standards regarding what a well-bred woman of pedigree should be, and Celine does not fit within those expectations by definition. This new world that she's discovering sits outside all of that, and it could be where she belongs. At the same time, she's not really interested in sacrificing her life as a human, which I really appreciate. She is bold and vibrant and forthright, and if she can't trust anyone to help her, you can damn well bet she's gonna help herself. I found this to be an incredibly intoxicating first book that goes to some really exciting places and weaves mystery and self-discovery and romance and sensuality into a unique supernatural story, and for that I gave it 4.5 stars. So those are all the books I read in the month of August. As always, if you've read any of them yourself or if you would like to, meet me in the comments down below and let's discuss. But that's everything I had for this wrap up today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye!